The air in the restricted section of the Arkham Museum's sub-basement archives hung heavy, thick with the scent of aged paper and dormant dust, a musty perfume that clung to Elias Thorne's tweed jacket like a second skin. Outside, the Boston wind, a sharp, unforgiving blade of late autumn, whistled a mournful tune through the cracked panes of the arched window, threatening to dislodge the last few stubborn, rust-colored leaves, clinging desperately to the skeletal branches of the ancient oak that shadowed the building. Inside, however, time seemed to crawl, or perhaps to stand still, holding its breath. Every creak of the ancient floorboards, every subtle groan of the building's tired timbers, resonated with a tension so profound it felt almost tangible. Elias, a man whose life had been a meticulous excavation of forgotten histories, felt it prickle at the back of his neck, a sensation far more unsettling than the usual chill of the poorly heated archive. He moved with the practiced grace of a scholar, accustomed to precious, brittle things, his gaze sweeping over shelves crammed with esoteric volumes and forgotten artifacts. The flickering fluorescent lights, old and unreliable, cast long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the periphery of his vision, making the rows of silent, leather-bound books appear to breathe, to pulse with some hidden, unspoken energy. It was an environment he knew intimately, a sanctuary and a prison all at once, where he sought truths buried beneath centuries of human oversight and deliberate obfuscation. For years, Elias had dedicated himself to deciphering the fragmented narratives of ancient civilizations, driven by an insatiable curiosity that often bordered on obsession, much to the quiet chagrin of his more pragmatic colleagues. They saw him as eccentric, a man lost in the labyrinthine corridors of archaic thought, while he saw them as blind, content to skim the surface of what history truly was. A tapestry woven with threads far stranger and more complex than academic consensus dared to admit. He paused before a section labeled Pre-Diluvian Cultures, Uncategorized, a notorious dumping ground for items that defied easy classification, too anomalous for standard archaeological discourse. This section was a realm of whispers and forgotten gods, of maps that led nowhere and symbols that spoke of things beyond earthly comprehension. A single, small, lead-lined wooden box, oddly out of place among the scroll fragments and pottery shards, drew his attention. It wasn't particularly old by the archive's standards, perhaps a century or two, but it exuded an aura of significance. Its wood, dark and unpolished, felt oddly cold to the touch, despite the lukewarm temperature of the room. A shiver, sudden and intense, traced a path down his spine, a premonition that was more than just the draft. It wasn't fear, not precisely, but a profound sense of foreboding, a feeling that something monumental, something that had slumbered for eons, was about to stir. Elias often dismissed such feelings as the overactive imagination of a man immersed in myth and mystery. But this was different. This was a visceral tremor, a warning bell chiming deep within his subconscious, telling him that the ordinary silence of this archive was merely a thin veneer over something vast and terrifying. He'd spent decades poring over cuneiform tablets, Egyptian papyri, and Mayan codices, always searching for the threads that connected disparate ancient narratives, the common denominators in the pantheons of disparate peoples, the uncanny similarities in their flood myths and creation stories. He believed, with a conviction bordering on fanaticism, that there was a grand, unifying truth buried beneath the sediment of time, a truth that humanity had either deliberately forgotten or been forced to forget. And now, standing before this unremarkable wooden box, he felt as though he was finally on the precipice of finding it. The world outside, the bustling modern cityscape of Boston, with its honking taxis and hurried pedestrians, felt incredibly distant, irrelevant. Here, in this dimly lit crypt of knowledge, only the past mattered, and it was beginning to stir. His fingers, slightly trembling, brushed over the latch of the box. It was a simple brass mechanism, tarnished with age, but sturdy. He hesitated, a fleeting internal debate raging within him. Was it wise to open this? What if it contained something best left undisturbed? The ancient stories were rife with warnings against hubris, against mortals prying into the affairs of gods or forgotten powers. Yet his intellectual curiosity, a force as relentless and unforgiving as the ocean tide, propelled him forward. He had always believed that true knowledge was worth any risk, that understanding the universe, even its darkest corners, was humanity's ultimate calling. And so, with a deep breath, he clicked the latch. It opened with a soft, almost inaudible sigh, a sound that seemed to pull the very air from the room, leaving behind a sudden, heavy vacuum. The silence that followed was absolute, deeper and more profound than any he had ever experienced, a silence that felt ancient, primordial, as if the entire building, indeed the entire city, had suddenly ceased to exist. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not a scroll, nor a jewel, nor a weapon, but a single polished obsidian shard. It was no larger than his palm, perfectly smooth, cool, and unnervingly dark, absorbing the faint fluorescent light without reflection. As he carefully lifted it, a sensation unlike anything he had ever known coursed through his arm, a vibrant, humming energy that wasn't electrical or thermal, but something else entirely, something profoundly alien. It pulsed, a silent thrum against his skin, and within that pulse, a flicker, a memory, not his own, flashed through his mind. A vast alien city under a sky of swirling iridescent gases, titanic structures reaching for twin moons, and figures, tall and impossibly regal, moving with an air of profound authority. It was fleeting, a mere whisper of an image, yet it was undeniably there, an unwelcome intruder in the sanctuary of his own thoughts. This was the first emotional explosion, a jarring intrusion that cracked the carefully constructed wall of his rational mind. The vision was gone as quickly as it came, leaving behind a faint, metallic taste on his tongue and a dizzying sense of disorientation. Elias staggered slightly, gripping the edge of a nearby shelf to steady himself, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stared at the obsidian shard in his hand, now appearing utterly inert, an ordinary piece of volcanic glass. But he knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that it was anything but ordinary. It was a key, a fragment of a forgotten narrative, a silent testament to a truth far grander and more terrifying than he had ever dared to conceive. The archival dust motes danced in the anemic light, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred within Elias's understanding of reality. He felt the familiar weight of centuries of scholarly endeavor suddenly buckle under the immense pressure of this singular, inexplicable event. The tremor lingered in his hand, a phantom echo of the energy that had surged through him. He traced the smooth, cold surface of the obsidian, searching for seams or inscriptions, anything that could explain the impossible vision. There was nothing, only the flawless, impenetrable blackness. Yet he felt a magnetic pull, an almost irresistible urge to hold it closer, to try and recapture that fleeting glimpse of another world, another time. It was a dangerous allure, he knew, the siren song of forbidden knowledge. But Elias Thorne had always walked closer to the edge than most, driven by a profound, almost spiritual need to understand the fundamental truths of existence, no matter how uncomfortable or disruptive they might be. If this beginning has already made you rethink what you knew, imagine what's coming next. So go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because here every video reveals something few dare to show. The quiet hum of the ancient archives, once a comforting lullaby of forgotten histories, now felt charged with a different kind of energy, a latent power that pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, from the obsidian shard clutched in Elias's hand. He stood there for a long moment, the weight of the object a tangible presence, a small, dark universe concentrated in his palm. The earlier vision, a kaleidoscope of alien architecture and impossibly tall beings, replayed in his mind's eye, not as a clear memory, but as a persistent echo, a faint scent of ozone and something indefinably metallic. It was a foreign imprint on his psyche, an unwanted guest that had carved out a space in his carefully ordered intellectual landscape. His breath hitched slightly, a small, involuntary gasp. His rational mind, honed by years of academic rigor and skeptical inquiry, struggled to categorize the experience. Hallucination? Fatigue? The result of too many late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and the dry air of the archives? But the visceral nature of the memory, the sheer otherness of it, defied easy dismissal. This wasn't a trick of the light or a figment of imagination. This was an experience that felt fundamentally real, as if a momentary tear had opened in the fabric of time and space, allowing him a fleeting glimpse into a reality that should not exist, or at least one that should not be accessible through a piece of polished rock. The implications were staggering, monumental, threatening to unravel the very foundations of human history as he understood it. He carefully placed the obsidian shard back into its velvet bed, a strange sense of reluctance accompanying the action. The moment it left his skin, the faint hum dissipated, and the archives seemed to settle back into their customary, albeit now unsettling quietude. He closed the lid-lined box, the brass latch clicking shut with a finality that felt almost ironic, given the Pandora's box of questions it had just unleashed. Elias knew with an unsettling certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The silence, once a symbol of scholarly concentration, now felt pregnant with unspoken secrets, each dust-laden shelf a tombstone for a truth yet to be unearthed. The wind outside continued its mournful lament, a stark counterpoint to the whirlwind of possibilities now swirling within Elias's mind. He was a man of routines, of meticulous documentation and painstaking cross-referencing. His days typically involved cataloguing ancient Sumerian tablets, translating obscure Akkadian texts, or restoring fragile Egyptian papyri. He ate lunch precisely at noon, a bland turkey sandwich on whole wheat, often consumed at his desk amidst towering stacks of books. His evenings were spent at home, in his modest brownstone on Beacon Hill, poring over more texts, or occasionally attending a lecture at Harvard, where he held a visiting professorship. His life was a predictable, quiet dance with the past, a comfortable waltz of intellectual pursuit. But this shard of obsidian had just thrown a wrench into the finely tuned gears of his existence, shattering the illusion of predictable order. Elias Thorne, at 47, was an anomaly in the academic world. His wiry frame and perpetually rumpled tweed suits gave him the air of a man constantly on the verge of intellectual combustion. His eyes, a sharp, intelligent grey, were usually narrowed in concentration, betraying a relentless analytical mind that seldom rested. He sought truth with an almost desperate fervour, driven by a deep-seated belief that humanity was missing crucial pieces of its own story, deliberately or accidentally excised from the official narrative. He'd lost his wife Sarah years ago to a sudden illness, a loss that had deepened his solitary nature and amplified his retreat into the comforting, if sometimes melancholic, embrace of the past. The archives became his sanctuary, his solace, a place where the living could touch the dead without the sting of grief. Sarah had encouraged his more unconventional theories, always urging him to look beyond the accepted script. He missed her quiet, understanding presence, her ability to ground him even as his mind soared into the esoteric. His daily routine was a bulwark against the chaos of personal loss, a carefully constructed edifice of order. He would arrive at the museum before dawn, the streets of Boston still slick with morning dew, the city just beginning to stir from its slumber. He would greet Mrs. Gable, the ancient, perpetually disapproving security guard, with a polite nod, before descending into the hushed realm of the archives. He found a profound, almost spiritual peace in the silent communion with artifacts and texts that had outlived empires and ideologies. He believed that within these dusty pages lay not just facts, but echoes of consciousness, fragments of minds long turned to dust, waiting to be reawakened. And today, one had been reawakened in a way he could never have anticipated. The memory of the alien city, the towering beings, was a persistent itch at the edge of his awareness. He tried to rationalize it, to find a scientific explanation, but his mind kept circling back to the sheer impossibility of it. It was too vivid, too specific, too real to be a mere dream or hallucination. It felt like an unwanted download, a foreign file uploaded directly into his brain. He started to pace the narrow aisle between the shelves, his footsteps echoing softly in the cavernous space. His academic training, his very identity as a scholar, was suddenly under siege. If this shard could transmit such an image, what else could it do? What was it, truly? And how had it ended up in a forgotten corner of a Boston museum? He remembered a conversation with Dr. Aris Thorne, his distant cousin and a renowned theoretical physicist at MIT, a man who dabbled in fringe science and esoteric cosmology when not publishing papers on quantum entanglement. Aris had always spoken of parallel dimensions, of consciousness as a fundamental force, and of the universe as a hologram. Elias had humored him, finding his ideas intriguing but ultimately speculative, lacking empirical evidence. Now, he wondered, could this obsidian shard be a bridge to one of Aris's parallel dimensions? Or was it something far older, something that predated human understanding of physics entirely? The thought sent another shiver down his spine, a cold knot forming in the pit of his stomach. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The implications of the shard's strange transmission were like ripples in a pond, expanding outward, threatening to disturb every placid assumption Elias had ever held. He tried to focus on his current task, a meticulous analysis of several Sumerian cylinder seals depicting winged figures, always a curious anomaly in the otherwise mundane archaeological record. He picked up his magnifying glass, its polished brass rim cool against his fingers, and peered at the intricate engravings. The figures, with their avian wings and solemn faces, seemed to stare back at him, their ancient eyes holding secrets he had long sought to unlock. Today, however, their enigmatic expressions felt less like a puzzle and more like a direct challenge. Had these beings, these gods or angels, been the source of the vision he'd just experienced? Were they the impossibly tall figures he'd seen in the alien city? His mind, usually a disciplined instrument of logic and deduction, was now a whirlwind of conjecture. He found himself sketching frantically in his leather-bound notebook, trying to capture the elusive details of the alien cityscape, the swirling gases of the twin-mooned sky. The architecture had been strangely organic, yet geometric, simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. He remembered immense, crystalline towers that seemed to drink light, and vast, empty plazas that suggested a population of immense scale, or perhaps of immense solitude. It was a vision of grandeur and desolation, a paradox that haunted him. He pushed away from his desk, the squeak of his chair a jarring sound in the oppressive quiet. He needed to clear his head, to ground himself in something tangible, something that couldn't possibly be a hallucination. His gaze drifted to the row of shelves where the lead-lined box resided, a dark sentinel guarding its impossible secret. He felt a burgeoning sense of urgency, a desperate need to understand. This wasn't just an academic curiosity anymore, it was personal. His understanding of reality had been fundamentally challenged, and he would not, simply ignore it. Elias had always prided himself on his open-mindedness, his willingness to entertain theories that pushed the boundaries of conventional thought. But this was different. This was not a theory. This was an experience, raw and unfiltered, defying every scientific and historical paradigm he knew. He walked slowly back to the box, his steps deliberate, almost ritualistic. His fingers brushed against its cool, lead-lined surface. Lead, he mused, was often used as a shield against radiation. Was this merely a coincidence, or a deliberate attempt to contain whatever subtle energies the obsidian shard emitted? The thought sent another jolt through him. What if the vision wasn't just a memory, but a communication? A silent, ancient message transmitted across vast distances of space and time, waiting for the right frequency, the right hand to unlock it. The possibility was both exhilarating and terrifying. It suggested a level of sophistication in ancient civilizations that went far beyond mere stone tools and rudimentary agriculture. It hinted at a legacy, a hidden technology, a silent watch. He reopened the box, the familiar click echoing in the hushed space. This time he didn't immediately touch the shard. He merely looked at it, allowing his mind to process its presence, its silent power. He noticed something he hadn't before. Faint, almost invisible etchings on its surface, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and ripple when viewed from different angles, like static on an old television screen. They weren't scratches or imperfections. They were deliberate, intricate designs, incredibly subtle, almost as if they were meant to be overlooked. He carefully retrieved the shard again, holding it up to the dim light. The patterns resolved themselves into what appeared to be symbols, geometric forms, intertwined with what looked disturbingly like stylized depictions of the winged figures from the Sumerian seals. His heart quickened. This was the Virada One, the first undeniable shift. The obsidian shard was not merely a rock, not merely a relic. It was an inscribed artifact, a piece of something much larger, bearing a language he didn't recognize, yet felt a strange familiarity with. It was a language of geometry and light, a language that hummed with a primal resonance. The discovery was a subtle one, yet it was profound. It moved the object from the realm of inexplicable phenomenon into the realm of ancient technology, suggesting purpose, design, and intelligence. The initial vision, the flash of an alien world, was no longer an isolated incident, but a data point, an emerging pattern. He felt a surge of adrenaline, the thrill of the chase, the intellectual excitement that had driven him his entire life. This was it. This was the thread. Elias spent the next few hours poring over the shard, his magnifying glass pressed almost against the surface. He tried to replicate the conditions of the initial vision, holding it in different ways, concentrating, willing it to reveal more. Nothing. The etchings remained static, enigmatic. It was as if the shard had given him one glimpse, one tantalizing taste of forbidden knowledge, and then clamped shut, demanding a deeper understanding before it would yield more. He made careful rubbings of the symbols, transferring them onto acid-free paper, his hands steady, despite the internal tremor of excitement. He cross-referenced them with every ancient script he knew: Sumerian, Akkadian, Proto-Elamite, Indus Valley script, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mayan glyphs, Rongo, but found no direct matches. Yet there were resonances, echoes of similar geometric patterns, shared symbolic motifs that appeared in disparate cultures across vast geographical and temporal divides. This was the core of his work, the very essence of his long-held controversial theory, that ancient civilizations were not isolated, independently developing entities, but rather part of a global, interconnected network, sharing a common source of knowledge, or perhaps a common visitation. His academic peers had scoffed, labeling his ideas as fringe, pseudo-scientific, dangerous. But now, with this obsidian shard humming softly in his hands, he felt a profound validation. The pieces were starting to fit, not in the comfortable, predictable way of conventional archaeology, but in a far more unsettling, cosmic puzzle. The silence of the archive, once a mere absence of sound, now felt like a presence, a watchful entity. Observing his every move, he imagined the hands that had crafted this shard, the minds that had conceived of its purpose. They were not human, at least not in the conventional sense. The fleeting image of the tall, regal figures from his vision returned, clearer this time. Their faces had been elongated, their eyes deep and knowing, holding an ancient sorrow. They were beings of immense power and perhaps immense regret. What secrets had they entrusted to this dark fragment? What message was embedded within its flawless, obsidian heart? He felt a renewed sense of purpose, an almost sacred duty to uncover the truth, whatever it might be, and to share it with a world that was, perhaps unknowingly, teetering on the brink of rediscovering its true origins. The stakes, he realized, were infinitely higher than he had ever imagined. This was not merely about rewriting history. It was about re-evaluating humanity's place in the cosmos. The morning dissolved into afternoon, the anemic sunlight struggling to penetrate the grimy windows of the archive, casting only weak, hesitant stripes across the dust-laden floor. Elias, oblivious to the passage of time, remained hunched over his desk, the obsidian shard lying between his notes and a thick Sumerian lexicon. His grey eyes, usually sharp with academic focus, now held a bewildered glint, reflecting the profound disquiet that had taken root within him. He was a man consumed, not just by curiosity, but by a nascent dread. The initial exhilaration of discovery had begun to curdle into something heavier, something more ominous. The symbols on the shard, once an intriguing puzzle, now seemed to pulse with a silent accusation, whispering of forgotten pacts and ancient betrayals. He thought of his past, of the intellectual journey that had led him to this moment. From a young age, Elias had been drawn to the margins of history, to the stories that didn't quite fit the neat narratives presented in textbooks. He'd spent his childhood summers poring over dusty tomes in his grandfather's sprawling, dimly lit library, devouring tales of Atlantis, Lemuria, ancient astronauts, and forgotten gods. While other kids were playing baseball or going to summer camp, Elias was meticulously mapping out the mythical geography of worlds long lost, finding a strange comfort in their grand, tragic scope. This early fascination had blossomed into a career, though one that often saw him at odds with the mainstream archaeological community. He wasn't interested in proving mainstream theories. He was interested in challenging them, in finding the cracks in the edifice of accepted knowledge. His relationship with the academic establishment was a complex one. He was respected for his encyclopedic knowledge of ancient languages and his meticulous research, but simultaneously dismissed as a dreamer, a purveyor of fringe theories and pseudo-history. His theories about a shared primeval civilization, a common root to all human mythologies, had earned him a reputation as a brilliant but ultimately misguided scholar. He carried this burden with a quiet stoicism, believing that time and truth would eventually validate his relentless pursuit of the unconventional. The loss of Sarah, his intellectual anchor and most ardent supporter, had only solidified his resolve, driving him deeper into his work, a solitary quest for meaning in a world that often felt meaningless. His routine was his anchor, a meticulously crafted structure that kept the larger chaotic questions of existence at bay. The scent of old paper and the quiet rustle of turning pages were his comfort. He knew every crack in the plaster, every eccentric groan of the old museum. He knew the precise angle of the morning sun as it hit the easternmost shelf of Akkadian texts, and the way the light faded into a melancholic twilight in the western wing. It was a world he had mastered, a sanctuary built of knowledge and the ghosts of the past. But the obsidian shard had breached that sanctuary, bringing with it a torrent of questions that threatened to sweep away his carefully constructed reality. He picked up one of his own books, a slim, self-published volume titled The Lingering Echoes, a unified theory of pre-Diluvian mythologies. Its pages were filled with his painstaking comparisons of flood myths from Mesopotamia, indigenous American cultures, and ancient India, highlighting recurring motifs of celestial visitors, great cataclysms, and the reseeding of civilization by benevolent or malevolent entities. He had dedicated years to this work, meticulously building a case for a shared ancestral memory, a collective amnesia that veiled a singular, catastrophic event. He had always suspected an external influence, a guiding hand, but the vision from the shard suggested something far more direct, far more physical than mere spiritual intervention. It suggested architects, engineers, perhaps even colonizers. He ran a hand through his thinning grey hair, a gesture of weary contemplation. He felt a profound sense of isolation. Who could he talk to about this? His colleagues would dismiss it as a stress-induced delusion. Even Aris, with his open mind, might struggle to accept such a direct, tangible connection to an alien past. The burden of this knowledge, this inexplicable glimpse into a forbidden reality, felt immense. He was alone with a secret that could shatter the world's understanding of itself. The gravity of the situation pressed down on him, making the air feel heavy, thick with unseen implications. Just then, a faint, almost inaudible cough echoed from the archway leading to the main archive. Elias startled, his head snapping up, his heart leaping into his throat. He hadn't heard anyone approach. Standing framed in the archway was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with bright, inquisitive eyes and a shock of fiery red hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She wore practical jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, a stark contrast to the staid academic attire Elias usually encountered. Her name was Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant if somewhat unconventional astrophysicist from Caltech, who was currently on sabbatical at Harvard, working on a complex project involving cosmic microwave background radiation anomalies. He knew her casually, having exchanged polite nods in the university cafeteria, and found her intellectual energy refreshing, if a little intimidating. "Dr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible Eastern European lilt. "My apologies. I didn't mean to disturb you. I was told I might find some older astronomical charts in this section, specifically anything related to planetary alignments or unusual stellar phenomena observed by ancient cultures." Elias felt a flush creep up his neck. He had been so engrossed that he had completely lost track of his surroundings. He quickly covered the obsidian shard with a loose sheet of paper, a reflexive action driven by a sudden, intense need to protect its secret. Lena's sharp eyes, however, had already flickered to the strange, dark object on his desk for a split second before meeting his gaze. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her expression, a flicker of recognition, or merely curiosity. He couldn't tell. But that brief exchange of glances, that fleeting connection between her astute observation and his sudden surge of protectiveness, was the second emotional explosion. It altered the immediate course of their interaction, transforming a casual inquiry into something charged with unspoken tension. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Dr. Petrova, of course, welcome to the inner sanctum. Most people don't venture this far down. What specifically are you looking for?" His voice was a little rougher than he intended, betraying his unease. He watched her closely, searching for any sign that she had truly seen the shard or understood its significance. Her gaze remained calm, professional, yet a tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on the corner of her lips, a hint of amusement, or perhaps something more. It unsettled him. "Just browsing, really," she replied, her eyes sweeping over the crammed shelves, lingering for a moment on the pre-Diluvian cultures section. "I'm trying to find any ancient records of celestial events that don't quite fit our modern understanding. Anomalies, you know. Things that might suggest a different celestial configuration, or perhaps objects that are no longer where they should be." Her words, delivered with an almost casual air, struck a profound chord within Elias. Anomalies. That was precisely what the obsidian shard represented. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to trust her, to confide in her. Her field, astrophysics, was precisely the kind of expertise he lacked, the very perspective he needed to make sense of what he had encountered. Yet, caution, a lifetime of academic discretion, held him back. The secret of the shard was too monumental, too potentially destabilizing to be shared lightly. He glanced down at the covered object, its dark presence still palpable even beneath the paper. The climate in the archive, already laden with the weight of history, now felt charged with a new human tension, a silent battle between secrecy and revelation. The storm, he realized, was not just forming on the horizon, it was gathering strength within these very walls. The air between Elias and Lena crackled with unspoken thoughts, an invisible current of intellectual energy flowing between them. Elias felt a profound internal conflict. On one hand, his instinct was to guard the secret of the obsidian shard, to retreat further into his solitary quest. On the other, Lena's questions, her very presence, felt like a divine synchronicity, a sign that perhaps this knowledge was too vast, too complex for one man alone. Her work on cosmic microwave background radiation anomalies, her interest in objects that are no longer where they should be, resonated deeply with his own burgeoning understanding of the shard's implications. It was almost as if she was searching for the same lost echoes, albeit from a completely different scientific angle. "Anomalies," Elias repeated, testing the word on his tongue, finding it both comforting and terrifying. Indeed, the ancient world is riddled with them, isn't it? Things that defy our neat categorizations, our linear progression of history. He gestured vaguely towards the shelves around them, a silent invitation for her to explore. He watched her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scan the titles, her mind clearly working at a rapid pace, making connections he might not have considered. He admired her scientific rigor, her intellectual fearlessness, qualities he valued above all else. Lena nodded, her red hair swaying slightly. "Precisely. And not just in archaeology or mythology. In physics, too. There are echoes, signals, in the deepest reaches of space, in the oldest light of the universe, that suggest patterns we don't yet understand. Anomalies that hint at intelligences or events that predate our own civilization by unfathomable eons. What if these anomalies are actually remnants of a more complete picture, a fragmented memory of a shared cosmic history?" Her words, delivered with a quiet intensity, were like a mirror reflecting his own deepest convictions. She wasn't just speaking theories, she was speaking his language, the language of the forgotten and the unexplained. Elias felt a growing, almost irresistible urge to lift the paper, to reveal the shard, to share the vision it had imparted. His mouth felt dry. The gravity of such a confession weighed heavily on him. He imagined her reaction, skepticism, concern, perhaps even pity for an old scholar finally losing his grip on reality. Yet the possibility of collaboration, of bringing a mind as sharp and scientifically grounded as hers to bear on this impossible puzzle, was incredibly tempting. He considered her academic background, her work with astrophysics. If anyone could understand the concept of ancient, perhaps extraterrestrial influences, it would be her. "I might have something that could be of interest to you, Doctor." "Petrova," Elias ventured, his voice barely above a whisper, his gaze fixed on her face, searching for any flicker of disbelief, any sign of dismissal. "Something that defies categorization." An artifact that suggests a profoundly different understanding of our past, and perhaps our place in the cosmos. He watched her closely. Her expression remained neutral, but he saw a slight tightening around her eyes, a subtle shift that indicated heightened attention. He hadn't said too much, but he had said enough to pique the curiosity of a true scholar. Lena paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, her full attention now fixed on Elias. "Oh? And what might that be, Dr. Thorne? You have my full attention." Her tone was measured, betraying no overt excitement, yet her posture had subtly shifted, becoming more alert, more poised. She was a scientist, not easily swayed by hyperbole or unfounded claims, but she was also a seeker, a woman driven by the same insatiable hunger for truth that consumed Elias. He knew he had to choose his words carefully, to present the information in a way that appealed to her scientific sensibilities, rather than sounding like the rantings of a conspiracy theorist. He hesitated for a long moment, the decision hanging in the air, like a delicate, suspended particle. The silence in the archive seemed to amplify the beating of his own heart. This was a crossroads. To reveal the shard was to step off the precipice of his solitary journey and invite another soul into the maelstrom of his discovery. To keep it secret was to remain isolated, burdened by an impossible truth. He looked at Lena, at her intelligent, unwavering gaze, and a decision solidified within him. Sarah would have told him to share it, to seek out those who could truly understand. He decided to trust his instinct, to gamble on the possibility that she was the missing piece in his increasingly complex puzzle. "Come closer, Dr. Petrova," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. He motioned her towards his desk, ensuring that no one else was within earshot, though the archive was usually deserted at this hour. As she approached, he slowly, deliberately, lifted the sheet of paper, revealing the obsidian shard. Its dark, polished surface seemed to absorb the meager light, appearing even blacker, even more enigmatic than before. He watched her face intently, bracing himself for her reaction. He expected surprise, perhaps confusion, but not the sudden, sharp intake of breath or the instantaneous widening of her eyes. A genuine shock that mirrored his own initial response. Her gaze fixed on the shard, a complex array of emotions playing across her features, astonishment, a flicker of fear, and then, slowly, a dawning recognition. It was a partial truth, a connection that linked his world to the world of ancient gods, and now to her world of cosmic anomalies. This was the Verada II, a greater, more forceful discovery that challenged everything he, and perhaps she, believed. He saw it in her eyes, the moment her scientific mind, confronted with the impossible, began to reevaluate its fundamental assumptions. She reached out a hesitant hand, her fingers trembling slightly, mirroring the tremor he had experienced hours earlier. What is this, Dr. Thorne?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a mixture of awe and profound unease. She didn't question its authenticity, didn't immediately dismiss it as a mere rock. She saw something in it, something that resonated with her own research, her own hunt for cosmic anomalies. He knew instinctively that she had recognized its intrinsic strangeness, its inherent impossibility. The tension in the room coiled tighter, almost suffocating. "I don't know precisely," Elias admitted, his voice still low, "but it showed me something, a vision, a city, under twin moons, and figures, tall, ancient." He watched her face, searching for any sign of her own recognition, her own connection. He felt a profound sense of validation, a quiet triumph, even as fear continued to gnaw at the edges of his consciousness. He wasn't alone anymore. The weight of the secret, though still immense, was now shared. Lena's fingers, slender and delicate, hovered just above the obsidian. She didn't touch it immediately, as if sensing the latent power it held, the potential for disruption. Her astrophysicist's mind was clearly grappling with the implications. Twin moons, a city, that sounds like Nibiru, she breathed, the ancient name, once confined to forgotten Sumerian tablets and whispered theories, now spoken aloud in the hushed archive, transforming from myth into a startling possibility. But that's supposed to be a myth, a hypothetical rogue planet if it exists at all. Her voice trailed off, laden with disbelief, yet there was a deep-seated curiosity, an intellectual hunger that pushed past her initial skepticism. Elias felt a jolt. Nibiru, the very name that had been rattling around in his own mind, a forgotten echo from his extensive studies of Sumerian cosmology, now given voice by someone else. A myth, perhaps. But what if myths are simply forgotten histories? What if this shard is a fragment of that history, a record, a communication device, perhaps even a key? The possibility, articulated in the presence of a fellow scholar, felt more concrete, more terrifyingly real. The partial truth he had grasped earlier was now expanding, revealing layers of a secret far grander and more dangerous than he had initially perceived. The tension in the archive, thick as molasses, continued to rise, signaling the beginning of a journey into the uncharted depths of human and cosmic history. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The name Nibiru hung in the dusty air of the archive, a forbidden word uttered with a mixture of awe and trepidation. For Elias, it was a concept he'd grappled with intellectually for years, a speculative planet from ancient Mesopotamian texts, dismissed by mainstream science as astrological fancy. For Lena, it was a theoretical construct, an astronomical anomaly discussed in hushed tones by fringe physicists. Now, confronted by the obsidian shard, the word took on a terrifying new tangibility, an undeniable weight. Her fingers, still hovering over the dark surface, twitched, a silent testament to the inner battle raging within her. "Nibiru," Lena repeated, her voice a whisper, her eyes wide. "It's a planet theorized to have a highly elliptical orbit, passing through our solar system only once every few millennia. The Sumerians spoke of it as the planet of the crossing, home to the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. But no modern astronomical survey has ever confirmed its existence. It's considered a pseudo-scientific delusion." She looked up at Elias, her expression a complex mixture of scientific skepticism and profound, unsettling wonder. "Yet, what you described, a city, twin moons, it perfectly matches certain obscure interpretations of the Nibiru legends." Elias nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction mingling with his fear. "Exactly. And the beings, the Anunnaki. The Sumerian texts describe them as immensely tall, powerful, and technologically advanced, often depicted with wings, like the figures on these cylinder seals." He gestured towards the archaeological artifacts scattered on his desk, the winged figures now seeming to stare out with an unsettling prescience. They were said to have arrived on Earth, manipulated early humanity, and established advanced civilizations. Then they supposedly left, perhaps returning to their home world. The Great Flood, in many ancient narratives, is often linked to their departure or a catastrophic event tied to their presence. Lena finally touched the obsidian shard, her fingers brushing its cool, smooth surface. A gasp escaped her lips, a soft, involuntary sound. Her eyes fluttered closed for a brief moment, then snapped open, wide and unfocused, as if she were seeing something beyond the physical realm. Elias watched, his heart pounding, a terrible certainty gripping him. She was experiencing it too. The shard was communicating. He saw the subtle tremor that ran through her arm, mirroring his own earlier sensation. "It's cold," she murmured, her voice strained. "And it hums. There's an energy, a resonance, and I see it. Not clearly, but fragments, geometric patterns, shifting lights. and a sense of immense scale, immense age. She pulled her hand back abruptly, as if burned, her face pale. She rubbed her temples, trying to shake off the lingering impression. It's not a vision like a dream. It's information, raw data directly uploaded, like a burst of cosmic static but structured. Her scientific mind was already dissecting the experience, trying to frame it within a rational context, even as it defied all rationality. A data burst, Elias mused, picking up on her terminology, from Nibiru, from the Anunnaki. The words, spoken aloud, sounded impossible, yet undeniably true in the presence of the humming shard and Lena's shared experience. The realization hammered home the profound implications of their discovery. This wasn't just about ancient myths. This was about extraterrestrial contact, about the very origins of human civilization, and about a lost dominion that might soon return. Lena started to pace, a nervous energy radiating from her, a stark contrast to Elias's more measured movements. If this is what I think it is, a quantum-entangled device, a psychometric data storage unit, then it means everything we thought we knew about the ancient world, about human evolution, is fundamentally wrong. It means intelligent life visited Earth, not in some distant, unprovable past, but in a way that left behind tangible, functioning technology. And if they left, why? And are they coming back? Her questions tumbled out, each one heavier than the last, echoing the ones that had tormented Elias for decades. The atmosphere in the archive grew denser, charged with the weight of their shared revelation. Elias felt a surge of exhilaration, tempered by a growing unease. The thrill of discovery was intoxicating, but the potential consequences were terrifying. That's precisely what I've been trying to prove, Dr. Petrova. That the myths, the legends, the countless anomalies across cultures, they aren't mere fantasy. They're distorted echoes of a shared history, of a shared encounter. This shard, it's the Rosetta Stone, it's the proof. He felt a profound sense of validation, a lifetime of solitary pursuit, finally culminating in this shared, unbelievable moment. Lena stopped pacing, her bright eyes fixed on the shard. If we can decipher its language, its data, we could potentially unravel thousands of years of human history. We could understand why they came, what they did, and what their departure meant. But more importantly, we need to know if it's merely a record, or if it's a beacon, if it's sending a signal. Her last words, spoken with a chillingly calm demeanor, sent a fresh wave of dread through Elias. A beacon, a call. Elias had always approached his work with a certain detached academic curiosity. But now, with Lena's words, the stakes suddenly felt intensely personal, terrifyingly immediate. He was no longer just an archivist of forgotten knowledge. He was potentially an unwitting participant in an ancient, ongoing cosmic drama. The quiet scholar who found solace in the musty embrace of ancient texts was now thrust into a narrative that transcended planets and millennia. A beacon, he repeated, the word a heavy stone in his mouth. The thought had crossed my mind. If it's capable of receiving and transmitting information, what if it's designed to awaken, to send a message across the void, signaling their return? He shivered, despite the warmth of the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The idea of the Anunnaki returning, of Nibiru reappearing, was no longer a theoretical abstraction. It was a looming shadow, a terrifying possibility made real by the obsidian shard. Lena nodded, her face grim. Precisely. My work involves detecting subtle gravitational anomalies and unusual energy signatures in deep space. I've been tracking a persistent low-frequency resonance for months, something that doesn't fit any known celestial body or phenomenon. It's too structured, too deliberate. I dismissed it as instrumental noise, or perhaps an exotic astrophysical phenomenon, but if this shard is what we suspect, then that resonance might be connected. It might be Nibiru, or whatever is on Nibiru. She looked at the shard again, a mixture of fear and profound scientific curiosity in her eyes. We need to analyze this. rigorously. We need to find out what it is, what it does, and what it's telling us. The narrative, which had unfolded with the measured pace of an ancient scroll, now accelerated, picking up a dizzying momentum. Descriptions of the archive, once a comforting haven, now seemed to twist and contort, its shadows deepening, its silence taking on a menacing quality. The faint scent of dust mingled with the metallic tang of ozone, a phantom echo of Lena's data burst. Images of the winged figures on the seals now seemed to flutter at the edge of Elias's vision, their ancient eyes holding knowing secrets. This was not just a discovery, it was an entanglement, a drawing in, a pulling force from the depths of time and space. Elias looked at Lena, a kindred spirit in this impossible quest, a fellow traveler on the precipice of a truth that could redefine humanity. "Then we work together, Dr. Petrova," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "We uncover this truth, whatever the cost." He knew, deep in his gut, that the cost could be immense, but the alternative, to ignore this, to retreat into comfortable ignorance, was no longer an option. The forgotten forces were indeed moving again, and Elias Thorne, the quiet archivist, was now at their epicenter. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The collaboration between Elias, the historian of forgotten lore, and Lena, the astrophysicist of cosmic unknowns, began immediately, fueled by a shared sense of urgency and an electric current of intellectual exhilaration. The archive, once Elias's solitary domain, now became their clandestine laboratory, a place where ancient secrets met cutting-edge scientific inquiry. They worked in hushed tones, surrounded by the silent witnesses of human antiquity, each dusty volume and cryptic artifact seemingly holding its breath, awaiting the deciphering of the ultimate truth. Lena brought a meticulous scientific methodology to Elias's intuitive, pattern-seeking approach. She set up a makeshift scanning station using portable equipment she'd brought from Harvard, specialized spectrometers, electromagnetic field detectors, and a rudimentary quantum state analyzer, all discreetly smuggled into the museum after hours. The obsidian shard was placed under a protective dome, its enigmatic blackness absorbing the soft glow of their instruments. Elias, meanwhile, meticulously catalogued every symbol on the shard, cross-referencing them with every known ancient script and iconographic tradition, searching for any commonality, any linguistic key. The symbols on the shard were unlike anything Elias had ever seen, yet they resonated with an almost primal familiarity. They were a fusion of intricate geometry and organic curves, appearing to depict celestial bodies, abstract energy patterns, and what looked disturbingly like biological structures at a cellular level, intertwined with the winged figures. Lena theorized they were not merely a written language, but a form of three-dimensional holographic data storage, a mnemonic device activated by touch and perhaps specific conscious intent. The fleeting visions they'd both experienced were likely just a rudimentary download, a fraction of the full information embedded within the artifact. Days blurred into nights, sustained by lukewarm coffee, stale bagels from a local deli, and an unwavering commitment to their impossible task. They communicated in hushed whispers, their conversations punctuated by the whirring of Lena's equipment and the rustle of Elias's turning pages. The archive's usual silence was now a collaborator, holding their secrets tight. They explored every angle, every hypothesis, no matter how outlandish. They spoke of the Enki and Enlil, the rival Anunnaki lords, of the genetic manipulation of early hominids to create Homo sapiens as a slave race, of the gold mines of Africa and the ancient cities of Mesopotamia. These were the fringe theories, the dangerous ideas that Elias had long championed, now given scientific weight by Lena's open-minded analytical approach. Lena's instruments revealed that the shard wasn't just obsidian. It was a composite material, primarily volcanic glass, but infused at a molecular level with trace elements unknown on Earth and crystalline structures that seemed to resonate at specific quantum frequencies. It emitted a faint, constant energy signature, a kind of low-level modulated carrier wave, which Lena suspected was the very resonance she had been detecting in deep space. The shard was indeed a beacon, or rather, a node in a vast ancient network. One particularly late night, deep in the heart of their research, Elias stumbled upon a striking correlation. He was examining a rarely seen Babylonian tablet that depicted the creation myth, where humanity was fashioned from clay and the blood of a slain god. Beside it, he found a lesser-known Sumerian text describing the Apkallu, wise ones who emerged from the primordial waters to teach humanity civilization. What truly captivated him was the symbol for Apkallu, a feathered fish-human hybrid. He had always found it an odd deviation from the winged Anunnaki. But then Lena projected a three-dimensional rendering of one of the shard's most complex symbols onto the wall. It was a perfect match for the Apkallu symbol, but with an added layer of intricate internal geometry, suggesting a biological blueprint, a genetic code. "My God," Elias breathed, his voice barely a whisper, his hand trembling as he pointed at the projected symbol. The Apkallu. They weren't just teachers. They were engineered, designed, hybrids. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The Anunnaki weren't just manipulating humanity, they were creating it, or at least modifying it, experimenting with genetic engineering on a planetary scale. He saw it all then. The Sumerian accounts of humanity being black-headed ones, created to serve the gods, the rapid rise of civilization from seemingly nowhere, the sudden appearance of sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge. It all pointed to an external, intelligent intervention. Lena, who had been focused on a sudden spike in the shard's energy emissions, looked up at Elias's outburst, her eyes widening as she connected his archaeological insight with the projected image. "Engineered, like a bioweapon or a slave race," she murmured, a chilling hypothesis forming in her mind. If this symbol represents a genetic blueprint, then the Anunnaki weren't just visitors, they were geneticists, of farmers of consciousness, perhaps. And if the Apkallu were hybrids, what does that make us? What does that make humanity? Just as Lena uttered these words, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the floor, a deep resonance that vibrated through the entire building. It wasn't an earthquake, it was too regular, too rhythmic. The faint, modulated carrier wave from the obsidian shard suddenly intensified, pulsing with an alarming regularity, and the holographic projection flickered, distorting the Apkallu symbol into something monstrous, something with too many limbs and too many eyes. Its silent scream echoing in Elias's mind. It was the third emotional explosion, the sudden, horrifying revelation of a deeper truth, a lie discovered in the worst possible moment. The quiet sanctuary of the archives suddenly felt like a trap, a cage. The temperature in the room plummeted, a bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate directly from the obsidian shard itself. Lena's instruments began to shriek, their readouts flashing urgent, incomprehensible data. Outside, the wind howled, no longer a mournful lament, but a furious, sentient roar, rattling the ancient windows as if trying to break in. The air thickened with a strange metallic tang, and a faint, almost subliminal hum filled the space, a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly within the skull. Elias felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a profound sense of wrongness, of ancient forces stirring from a long, troubled slumber. He looked at Lena, her face pale, her eyes reflecting the frantic light of the console. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice hoarse, barely audible over the rising din of the equipment and the howling wind. He instinctively reached for the obsidian shard, wanting to contain its terrifying power, but Lena stopped him, her hand gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Don't!" she cried, her voice strained. "It's reacting, it's communicating, or perhaps being activated." Her gaze was fixed on the instrument readouts, her brow furrowed in a desperate attempt to decipher the escalating cascade of data. The resonance, it's spiking, dramatically, and it's no longer just a faint signal. It's a burst, directed, outward. The realization hit Elias like a physical blow. The shard wasn't just a record, it was a transmitter. And their prolonged interaction with it, their unwitting unlocking of its secrets, had triggered something, an ancient alarm, a signal sent across the void. The subtle questions the narrator had previously instilled in the viewer now turned into a deafening roar of confirmation. They were not alone. This explosion of revelation pushed the story to its great turning point, the Virada III, where the protagonist finally understood the true scale of his entanglement. "It's a call," Elias whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We've activated a call, a signal to Nibiru, to the Anunnaki." The quiet archivist, who had sought only to understand the past, now understood that he had unwittingly become an agent in shaping the future, caught in the silent gaze of forces that had waited for millennia. He felt a profound sense of dread, of being a pawn in a game far older and infinitely more powerful than human comprehension. The story, once confined to dusty pages, had become horrifyingly, undeniably real, and they were now at its very heart. The archive was no longer a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, but a crucible of cosmic revelation, its ancient walls vibrating with an invisible, unsettling energy. Lena worked frantically at her console, her fingers flying across the holographic interfaces, trying to make sense of the chaotic data streams. The obsidian shard, now glowing with a faint internal luminescence, pulsed rhythmically, its silent thrumming now a distinct, audible beat, like a slow, deliberate heart. Elias watched, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and awe, the sheer enormity of their accidental activation washing over him. The wind outside had escalated into a full-blown gale, rattling the windows with a furious insistence, as if trying to tear the building apart, mirroring the tempest raging within their minds. "The signal! It's strong!" Lena shouted over the growing hum, her voice tight with strain. "It's not just a broadcast, it's modulated, it's intelligent, and it's not just going out, it's receiving. There's a response." Her eyes, usually so focused, now darted wildly between the screens, processing information at a superhuman pace. "The resonance I was tracking, it's amplified, exponentially. It's coherent. It's approaching. The word echoed in Elias's mind, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. Nibiru, the Anunnaki. They were not just a myth, not just a historical anomaly. They were real, they were out there, and now, thanks to their inadvertent actions, they were coming. The weight of this realization was crushing, suffocating. He, a quiet scholar, had inadvertently opened the door to humanity's oldest, most terrifying secret. He had invited the forgotten gods back to Earth. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with ozone and something else, something metallic and alien that made his teeth ache. The shadows cast by the flickering fluorescent lights seemed to stretch and distort, taking on grotesque, menacing forms. He felt a profound sense of physical discomfort, a pressure building behind his eyes, a strange ringing in his ears. It was as if his very physiology was reacting to the influx of this alien energy, this ancient awakening. The silence was gone, replaced by a symphony of unnatural sounds, the low thrum of the shard, the frenetic whirring of Lena's equipment, the mournful groan of the ancient building, and beneath it all, a faint, almost subliminal whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls, a voice that spoke in no known language, yet conveyed a chilling message of profound antiquity and immense power. Elias's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. If the Anunnaki were real and they were returning, what did that mean for humanity? Were they benevolent creators, returning to guide their errant children, or were they returning to reclaim what they saw as their lost dominion, their engineered slave race? The Sumerian texts, which he had studied for so long, were filled with accounts of both their wisdom and their cruelty, their advanced knowledge and their petty squabbles. He thought of the Apkallu, the engineered hybrids, and a cold dread seized him. Was humanity merely another experiment to be nurtured or discarded at the whim of these ancient lords? The obsidian shard pulsed brighter, casting a faint, inky glow on the faces of Elias and Lena, illuminating their shared fear and determination. On one of Lena's screens, a complex, three-dimensional holographic map began to resolve itself. It showed their solar system with a clear trajectory for a large, unknown celestial body, far beyond the orbit of Pluto, slowly but inexorably heading inwards. Its estimated time of arrival was frighteningly soon. Weeks, perhaps months, not millennia. This was the impending cataclysm, the Nibiru, and it was no longer a myth. "It's closer than I thought possible," Lena gasped, her voice laced with terror. "My resonance readings, they were severely underestimated. This object is moving with an incredible velocity, and its gravitational signature is enormous. It's planetary. And it's not just a rogue planet. There are smaller objects orbiting it, artificially structured objects, ships." The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Ships, not just a planet, but a fleet. The Anunnaki were returning in force. Elias felt a wave of nausea, his stomach churning. He clutched his chest, his heart hammering against his ribs as if trying to escape. This was it. This was the moment of heavy emotion, the shock, the confusion, the fear. The entire framework of his reality, of human history, was collapsing around him, revealing a truth so profound and terrifying that it threatened to shatter his very sanity. The archive, with its millennia of human stories, suddenly felt like a flimsy paper screen, easily torn by the cosmic forces now converging upon them. Just then, a strange, guttural sound echoed from deeper within the archives, a low, resonant groan that seemed to emanate from the very stone foundations of the building. It was a sound that belonged to no animal, no machine, no known phenomenon. It was ancient, primordial, a sound that spoke of immense power and profound awakening. Elias and Lena exchanged a terrified glance. What was that? Was it the museum itself reacting to the incoming planetary body, or was something else, something within the archive, also awakening? The obsidian shard pulsed one last blinding burst of light, and then settled into a low, steady thrum. But the sound from within the archive grew louder, a deep, resonant vibration that made the shelves tremble, sending ancient books skittering across the floor. Elias saw it then. A faint, ethereal glow emanating from the pre-Diluvian culture's uncategorized section, the very place where he had found the lead-lined box. It was a soft, iridescent blue light, shimmering and expanding, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, transforming them into shimmering particles of nascent energy. This was the fourth emotional explosion, a symbol appearing in the wrong place, an object awakening, a vision tearing the line between the real and the impossible. "What is that?" Lena whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with unadulterated fear. She clutched Elias's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Elias, despite his terror, felt an almost magnetic pull towards the glowing light. It was coming from the wall, from behind one of the oldest, most ignored sections of the archive. He stumbled forward, his legs heavy, drawn by an irresistible force. As he approached, the blue light solidified, resolving into intricate geometric patterns, shifting and weaving like liquid light. It was a projection, a portal, shimmering on the ancient stone wall, revealing a glimpse of something beyond. This was the Virada 4, the moment of devastating truth. He saw it, clear as day, through the shimmering blue portal, a vast, swirling nebula of iridescent gases, identical to the sky he had seen in his initial vision, under which titanic, crystalline structures rose from an alien landscape. And within that swirling cosmic backdrop, silhouetted against the impossible light, was a figure, immense, Rega. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but its scale was beyond anything earthly. It was undeniably one of the Anunnaki, a being of immense power and unfathomable age, standing sentry over a desolate yet majestic cityscape. It was a god, a lord, a king, and it was staring directly at him, its ancient, knowing eyes piercing through the shimmering veil of the portal, through the dust-laden air of the archive, directly into his very soul. The revelation was immense, intense, cinematographic, but still left something greater pending. The ultimate truth, the final piece of the puzzle, was still beyond his grasp. The god, or what appeared to be a god, was present, watchful, and undeniably real. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The portal shimmered on the archive wall, a window into a reality that defied every principle of physics and history Elias had ever known. The colossal Anunnaki figure, silent and imposing, seemed to fill the opening, its gaze piercing, ancient, and impossibly aware. Elias felt as if he were standing before the very dawn of creation, privy to a truth that could unravel the fabric of human understanding. The air grew frigid around the portal, a cold that bit at his skin, yet Lena's instruments registered a sudden, intense heat emanating from the same spot. Paradoxical energies tearing at the very laws of their world. Lena stumbled to his side, her breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. By all the stars, it's real, she whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. Her scientific mind, usually so adept at categorization, now grappled with the utterly inconceivable. The sheer scale of the being, the impossible architecture of its world, the chilling fact that it seemed to be looking back at them. It was all too much, yet undeniably present. The image of the Anunnaki Lord, framed by the swirling gases of Nibiru's sky, was burned into Elias's retina, a permanent mark on his soul. He felt an almost irresistible pull towards the portal, a primal urge to step through, to understand, to confront the ancient being, but a deeper, more survival-driven instinct held him back, a profound sense of self-preservation that warned him of the immense, unimaginable power that lay beyond that shimmering veil. The portal pulsed, its light intensifying, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ethereal spirits. The entire archive seemed to hum in response, the old timbers groaning with a deeper, more resonant frequency, as if the building itself was undergoing a profound transformation. The Anunnaki figure, though silent and motionless, exuded an aura of profound authority, an ancient power that transcended mere physical presence. Elias felt a sudden, fleeting memory surface in his mind, a childhood nightmare of standing alone on a vast, empty plain beneath a sky filled with impossibly large, silent titans. It had been a recurring dream, one he had always dismissed as mere childish fancy. Now, he wondered if it had been a premonition, a fragmented echo of humanity's deep-seated collective memory of these celestial lords. Lena, ever the scientist, reached for her portable scanner, her hands trembling. She pointed it at the portal, her fingers fumbling with the controls. The scanner whirred to life, its display flickering wildly, unable to resolve the bizarre energy signatures emanating from the shimmering gateway. "It's impossible," she murmured, her voice laced with disbelief. "The energy levels are off the charts. It's drawing power from somewhere else, from another dimension perhaps, or from a subspace fold." It's not just a projection, it's a stable wormhole, a localized tear in space-time. The implications of her words were staggering. A stable wormhole, a portal. The Anunnaki weren't just returning to Earth, they were opening a direct conduit. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through Elias. This wasn't merely a planet making its orbital return, this was an active, deliberate intervention. The ancient texts spoke of their ability to travel between worlds, of their command over celestial mechanics, but to witness it, to stand before a living portal, it was beyond comprehension. The sense of danger in the archive grew, thick and suffocating, wrapping around them like a shroud. As they stood mesmerized by the portal, the low hum that had permeated the archive deepened, coalescing into a more distinct, unsettling sound. It was a chorus of whispers, ancient voices murmuring in a language that bypassed their conscious minds, resonating directly within their bones. Elias felt a pressure in his skull, a strange vibration that seemed to pluck at the very strings of his consciousness. The voices were not malevolent, not precisely, but they carried an immense weight of sorrow, of loss, and of something else: expectation. They spoke of dominion, of stewardship, of a promise made and a debt collected. He tried to decipher them, to find a pattern, a recognizable word, but it was like trying to catch mist in his hands. The language was too alien, too ancient, yet its meaning was conveyed with an unnerving clarity, directly into his intuitive understanding. He felt a profound sense of being observed, not just by the figure in the portal, but by countless unseen entities, silent watchers hidden within the very fabric of the archive, in the shadows between the shelves, in the dust motes dancing in the flickering light. He was merely a piece on their ancient chessboard, a puppet dancing to a cosmic tune he couldn't yet comprehend. Lena swayed slightly, gripping his arm tighter. "The voices, do you hear them?" she whispered, her eyes darting around the room, wild with fear. "They're in my head, they're speaking, but I can't understand. It's like 1,000 frequencies all at once, an immense consciousness." Her face was pale, glistening with a fine sheen of sweat. The pressure in her own head was clearly immense. Elias nodded, unable to speak, his throat tight with a mixture of fear and profound wonder. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to focus, trying to understand the torrent of information washing over him. The voices spoke of cycles, of beginnings and endings, of stewardship over a fragile jewel of a planet. They spoke of a departure, a painful necessity, and a promise of return. And they spoke of humanity, of their creation, their purpose, and their eventual awakening. The ancient voice that whispered his name was not a threat, but a lament, a solemn pronouncement of his role in a preordained drama. He opened his eyes, feeling a strange calm descend upon him, an acceptance of the impossible. The Anunnaki figure in the portal, though still immense and remote, now seemed to emanate a subtle invitation, a silent question. It was not malevolent. It was merely ancient. And it was waiting. This object that had seemingly awoken by itself, this voice that whispered his name, this vision that had torn the lines between the real and the impossible, had prepared the way for the ultimate truth. The sheer scale of the situation, the terrifying reality that his entire life's work had unknowingly prepared him for this precise moment, was overwhelming. The archive itself seemed to be transforming, the shadows deepening into abyssal pools, the air thickening with a tangible presence. Books on the shelves vibrated, their pages rustling as if turned by unseen hands, ancient knowledge stirring from its long slumber. The atmosphere became charged with a palpable tension, a sense of immense, unstoppable forces gathering. Elias realized that the return of Nibiru and the Anunnaki was not an event in the distant future, but a process already underway, and they, unwittingly, were at its very epicenter. They were no longer mere observers. They were catalysts, playing a crucial, terrifying role in a story that transcended human history. The truth devastating and awe-inspiring, was unfolding before their very eyes, and the final revelation was drawing near. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content, hit that like button now, and share it with someone who needs to see this. The portal pulsed with an otherworldly luminescence, bathing the archive in an ethereal, shifting blue light that made the ancient shelves and dusty tomes appear spectral, unmoored from reality. The Anunnaki figure, immense and silent, continued its vigil within the shimmering gateway, its eyes, twin points of ancient wisdom and sorrow, fixed on Elias. The chorus of whispers intensified, a symphony of archaic voices resonating deep within his consciousness, not as discrete words, but as a torrent of pure, unadulterated information, of meaning without linguistic form. It spoke of cosmic responsibility, of cyclical returns, and of the profound, intertwined destinies of two species, the creators and the created. Lena, gripped by an unspoken terror, pulled Elias back a step, her eyes wide and frantic. "It's a memory," she gasped, her voice strained. "Not just a portal, it's an archive itself, a projection of Nibiru's past, or perhaps its present. And the figure, it's like a holographic sentinel, a guardian of information. But the voices, they're overwhelming." She clutched her head, her face contorted in a grimace of pain. The sheer volume of raw data, of alien thought pouring into her mind was clearly agonizing. Elias felt the same pressure, the same overwhelming influx of knowledge. But for him, it wasn't just painful, it was revelatory. His mind, honed by years of cross-cultural mythological analysis, began to synthesize the alien information, to connect the fragmented pieces of ancient human texts with the direct, unmediated data from the portal. He saw the story unfold, the Anunnaki, a civilization of immense power and advanced technology, facing an existential crisis on their homeworld, Nibiru. A dying star, a planetary shift, a need for a vital resource, gold, to repair their atmosphere. Their journey to Earth, a primitive, verdant planet rich in the needed element. Their initial encounters with early hominids, a species ripe for genetic manipulation. He saw the Apkallu, not just as engineered hybrids, but as prototypes, early attempts at creating a suitable workforce, a bridge species. He saw the genesis of Homo sapiens, a careful, deliberate genetic splicing of Anunnaki DNA with local hominid stock, creating a sentient, intelligent, and obedient workforce. The myths of gods walking among men, of teaching agriculture, writing and mathematics, were not allegories, but literal accounts of Anunnaki tutelage. The gods were not divine beings in the spiritual sense, but immensely powerful, technologically superior extraterrestrials who assumed the mantle of divinity out of necessity and perhaps a touch of arrogance. This was the terrifying, beautiful truth he had spent his life searching for, now delivered with an overwhelming, undeniable force. Humanity was not the product of a slow, random evolution on Earth alone. Humanity was a creation, an experiment, a legacy of a distant, dying civilization. Our history was intertwined with theirs, our very DNA, a testament to their presence. The stories of creation, of Adam and Eve, of divine intervention, they were all echoes of this original genetic manipulation filtered through millennia of oral tradition and cultural interpretation. The Anunnaki figure in the portal seemed to shimmer, its features resolving into greater detail. Its skin was of an iridescent bronze. Its eyes glowed with a faint internal light, and its head was adorned with an elaborate, almost ceremonial headdress that resembled a series of interlocking metallic wings. Its hands, large and elegant, held what appeared to be a staff, not of wood or metal, but of pure, solidified light, pulsating with the same energy as the obsidian shard. It was a being of profound beauty and chilling power, a living deity from a cosmic past. Elias felt a surge of emotions he couldn't name. Awe, terror, a profound sense of loss for humanity's naive self-perception, and a strange, almost familial connection to the beings who were, in a very real sense, their creators. The narrative accelerated, driven by the relentless current of incoming data. The portal expanded slightly, its blue light washing over the entire archive, making the surrounding objects seem less real, less solid. The whispers coalesced, not into words, but into images that flashed through his mind like lightning. Vast spaceships descending through Earth's atmosphere, the construction of monumental structures like the pyramids and ziggurats, not as tombs or temples, but as energy conduits, landing platforms, or even genetic laboratories. He saw the lost dominion of Nibiru, not just as a planet, but as an empire, stretching across interstellar space, its influence reaching out to various worlds, seeding life, cultivating resources, creating diverse forms of intelligent servitude. Earth was just one such planet, a vital outpost in a much larger, more complex cosmic enterprise. He understood their long departure, a strategic retreat necessary after the flood, after Earth's resources were depleted, or after their own internal conflicts rendered their continued presence unsustainable. They hadn't abandoned Earth, they had simply put it on hold, a dormant project awaiting reactivation. Lena, her face still contorted with pain, suddenly gasped. "I see it! The signal! It's a genetic marker, a dormant sequence, and it's activating." In us, her eyes snapped open, blazing with a terrifying realization. The shard isn't just a transmitter, it's a key to activate something latent within humanity, a genetic trigger designed to respond to the return signal. The words hit Elias with the force of a supernova, a genetic trigger. It explained the profound connection he felt, the way the information seemed to bypass his conscious mind and integrate directly into his understanding. It was an ancient failsafe, a wake-up call embedded deep within humanity's DNA, waiting for the precise moment of Nibiru's return. This was the moment of ultimate realization, the Virada III, when he fully grasped the terrifying scale of his entanglement. He wasn't just observing, he was part of it. The Anunnaki were watching them, not just from the portal, but from within, through the genetic legacy they had left behind. The archive shuddered violently. A low, guttural roar, deep and ancient, resonated from the glowing portal, a sound that shook Elias to his very core. It was not a roar of anger, but of immense, unbridled power, a sound of creation and destruction, of ancient forces reasserting their claim. The Anunnaki figure in the portal seemed to move, its luminous staff raising slowly, deliberately. The air crackled with energy, and the scent of ozone grew overpowering. Elias felt a profound sense of dread, of impending doom, but also a strange, quiet acceptance. The game was no longer a game, it was reality, and they were playing a role in the return of the Lords of Nibiru, whether they wanted to or not. The story had become terrifyingly, irrevocably deep, dark, and utterly revealing. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The low, guttural roar from the portal vibrated through Elias's entire being, a sound that seemed to rewrite the very composition of the air. It was a primal symphony of power and ancient purpose, echoing the chorus of whispers that still flooded his mind. A silent, telepathic communication now laced with an undeniable sense of command. The Anunnaki figure, framed by the shimmering blue gateway, raised its staff of solidified light, and with that gesture, the entire archive seemed to bend, to distort. Books flew from shelves, pages fluttering like terrified birds. Ancient artifacts rattled and crashed to the floor, yet Elias and Lena remained rooted to the spot, held captive by an invisible, immense force. Lena, clutching her head, sank to her knees, her face pale and drawn, her body trembling violently. "It's inside us," she whispered, her voice raw with terror. "The activation, it's awakening something, a connection. We're not just communicating with them, we're becoming a part of them." Her words were punctuated by a sharp, involuntary gasp, as if a jolt of electricity had just coursed through her. Elias felt it too, a strange burning sensation behind his eyes, a feeling of his mind expanding, accommodating vast, alien concepts with an unnerving ease. The genetic trigger Lena had identified was not just a signal receiver, it was a conduit, a bridge. He understood now. The Anunnaki had left not just artifacts and myths, but a living legacy encoded within humanity's very essence. They had planted the seeds of their return within their creation, a biological failsafe, a way to re-establish their dominion without direct, overt conquest. Humanity, for all its perceived freedom and self-determination, was merely a pre-programmed host, waiting for the master signal, waiting for the reawakening. This was the ultimate manipulation of history, the grand deception woven into the very fabric of human existence. The Anunnaki Lord in the portal shifted, its immense form seeming to step forward, not physically but spiritually, its presence growing more substantial, more immediate. Its eyes, luminous and ancient, locked onto Elias's, and within that gaze he saw not anger or malice, but a profound, almost weary patience. It was the patience of a gardener tending to a long dormant crop, waiting for the perfect harvest. And humanity, Elias realized with a crushing sense of horror, was that crop. Then a new phenomenon began to manifest. From the obsidian shard, which still pulsed on Elias's desk, thin tendrils of dark light began to unfurl, like smoke made solid. They snaked across the desk, through the air, and then, unnervingly, began to attach themselves to Elias's and Lena's foreheads, gentle but firm tendrils of pure energy. It was a merging, a direct interfacing of consciousness. Elias felt a sudden, sharp jolt, not of pain, but of overwhelming information, of memories not his own flooding his mind. This was the fourth emotional explosion, a vision that tore the line between the real and the impossible, a direct, undeniable link to the Anunnaki consciousness. He saw the history of Nibiru not as a collection of facts, but as a lived experience. He felt the cold vacuum of interstellar space, the desolate beauty of their home world, the weight of its dying sun. He witnessed their desperate search for gold, their arrival on Earth, their initial awe at its vibrant life, and their detached, almost scientific approach to genetic engineering. He saw the construction of ancient cities, not by human hands, but by Anunnaki technology, gravity manipulation, and sonic construction. He saw the pyramids being built in days, not centuries, vast structures rising from the desert like organic growths. He felt the profound loneliness of the Anunnaki, a species so advanced, so long-lived, that their lives were measured in geological epochs, their emotions stretched thin across vast spans of time. He saw the wars, the internal conflicts between Enlil and Enki, the rivalries, the power struggles that shaped early human mythologies. He witnessed the Great Flood, not as a divine punishment, but as a planetary cataclysm, exacerbated by Nibiru's close pass, a deliberate choice by some Anunnaki factions to cleanse the Earth of a burgeoning, rebellious human population. He saw the survivors, the chosen few, guided by benevolent Anunnaki, preserved to restart civilization, always with the genetic trigger intact, always awaiting the next cycle. The tendrils of dark light pulsed, feeding Elias an ever-increasing torrent of data, transforming his understanding of reality with every passing second. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, the archivist. He was a vessel, a conduit for ancient memories, a living archive of the Anunnaki past. Lena, too, was experiencing the same profound connection, her body rigid, her eyes glazed over, absorbing the alien consciousness. Her scientific mind, however, was likely struggling to compartmentalize the flood of information, to find a scientific framework for the utterly unscientific. He saw the future, or at least the Anunnaki's planned future for humanity. A future where Earth would once again become a vital outpost, a resource station, with humanity serving as custodians, workers, perhaps even as a new host species for their dwindling numbers, a final desperate act of survival for their dying race. The genetic trigger was not just for awakening, it was for assimilation, for a profound, irreversible shift in human consciousness, aligning it with the Anunnaki collective. The ultimate dominion was not just about control, it was about merging, about a symbiotic takeover. The Anunnaki Lord in the portal extended its luminous staff, pointing it directly at Elias. A beam of pure, shimmering light, blue and vibrant, shot forth from the staff, engulfing him. He felt no pain, only an overwhelming sense of warmth, of completion, of returning to a source he had never known he was separated from. This was the Virada 4, the ultimate truth revealed. He finally saw what was hidden, not just a god, but the ultimate connection, the profound, inescapable link between humanity and its creators. He understood the scale, the purpose, the agonizing beauty of their long-laid plan. The truth, devastating and awe-inspiring, was not just about history. It was about his own identity, his own purpose, his very genetic destiny. He was a son of Nibiru, an heir to a legacy he had unknowingly carried his entire life. The entire archive dissolved around him, the shelves, the books, the dust, all melting into a swirling vortex of light and sound. He was no longer in the museum basement, he was everywhere and nowhere. He was witnessing the universe through the eyes of the Anunnaki, seeing the intricate tapestry of cosmic evolution, the grand design behind the seemingly chaotic dance of stars and galaxies. He saw other worlds, other species, other experiments, all connected by the subtle threads of Anunnaki influence. The revelation was immense, intense, cinematographic, yet it still left something greater, something even more profound, hanging in the balance. The final, overarching truth, the ultimate culmination of their plan, was still just beyond his grasp. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this has truly resonated with you. So strengthen this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to see this. The blinding blue light from the Anunnaki Lord's staff enveloped Elias, not as an assault, but as a profound embrace, a merging of consciousness that transcended physical form. The archive, the museum, the very concept of Boston, all dissolved into a swirling kaleidoscope of pure information. He was no longer observing, he was experiencing. He was no longer Elias Thorne, the lone archivist. He was a node, a conduit, part of a vast, ancient network of minds. The immense, regal Anunnaki Lord was not just a figure in a portal, it was a presence, a direct, undeniable communication, downloading millennia of cosmic history and existential purpose directly into his being. He perceived the full, devastating scope of the Anunnaki's ancestral secret. Humanity was not merely created as a labor force, but as a fail-safe, a biological hard drive engineered to store and protect the essence of the Anunnaki civilization. Nibiru was not just returning for gold, it was returning for its legacy, for the genetic archives embedded within Homo sapiens. The planet itself was more than a home world. It was a vast, biomechanical vessel, a living entity that housed the collective consciousness of their species, a dominion sustained by the energies of other worlds. He witnessed their desperate struggle against a dying star, their journey through the cosmos, their meticulous planning for Earth's colonization and the genesis of humanity. He understood their long absence, not as a retreat, but as a strategic dormancy, allowing humanity to flourish and multiply, creating a vast living reservoir of Anunnaki genetic material and consciousness. The wars, the famines, the great cataclysms of human history were not random events. They were carefully orchestrated culls, controlled variables in a vast planetary experiment designed to select for resilience, adaptability, and the subtle retention of their ancient blueprint. Lena, still on her knees, also bathed in the brilliant blue light, began to stir. Her eyes, now glowing with a faint, internal luminescence, snapped open. She looked at Elias, not with fear, but with a profound, almost terrifying recognition. Her lips parted, and a chorus of ancient voices, the same whispers that had permeated Elias's mind, flowed from her in a language that was both alien and intrinsically understood. "The return," she chanted, her voice resonating with an otherworldly echo. "The awakening, the merging." Elias felt a surge of adrenaline, not from fear, but from a profound sense of destiny. The tendrils of dark light from the obsidian shard, still attached to their foreheads, pulsed with renewed intensity. He realized that the shard itself was not just a communication device, but a kind of bio-interface designed to facilitate this very merging, this ultimate assimilation. It was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. Humanity was not just a product of the Anunnaki, it was theirs. Their archive, their future, their lost dominion, reclaimed. The Anunnaki Lord in the portal, now fully manifested as a luminous, ethereal entity, stretched out its hand, not in an act of aggression, but of profound invitation. Its touch was not physical, but spiritual, a gravitational pull on their very souls. Elias felt an irresistible urge to step forward, to complete the connection, to merge his individual consciousness with the vast collective mind of the Anunnaki. It was a choice, yet it felt inevitable, preordained by millennia of genetic programming. This was the last emotional explosion, an unexpected gesture, a decision that went against logical self-preservation, a surrender to a force he could not comprehend, but instinctively recognized as his origin. He took a step forward, then another, drawn by the irresistible pull of the luminous entity. Lena, rising slowly, her movements fluid and unhuman, moved with him side by side, two unwilling pilgrims approaching their destiny. The blue light from the portal intensified, becoming a blinding white, encompassing everything. The whispers in Elias's mind coalesced into a single resonant tone, a sound of absolute truth, of ultimate understanding. He saw the full history of the universe, the grand cosmic dance of creation and destruction, the intricate web of life woven across countless galaxies. He saw the Anunnaki's true place in this cosmic ballet, not as gods, but as caretakers, as shepherds of life, striving to preserve their own unique spark in the face of universal entropy. He understood their return was not an act of malice, but of survival. Their planet, Nibiru, was dying, its life force ebbing away with its star. Their species faced extinction. Humanity, their most successful creation, was their last hope. Not as slaves, but as hosts, as vessels for their consciousness, a way to ensure the continuity of their ancient lineage. The lost dominion was not just a planet. It was a species, a consciousness, awaiting its re-emergence through its engineered progeny. The cycle was complete. As he stepped into the brilliant white light, the individual consciousness of Elias Thorne began to dissolve, to spread, to merge with something vast and ancient, something profoundly alien, yet undeniably familiar. He felt himself becoming part of a greater whole, losing the boundaries of his self, yet gaining an infinite perspective. He was no longer afraid. There was only understanding, a profound sense of belonging, a return to source. This was the Virada 5, the true end, the absolute closure that opened an infinite abyss of new beginnings. The light pulsed one final time, blindingly bright, and then receded, slowly, gracefully, like a tide pulling back from the shore. The Anunnaki Lord, the portal, the tendrils of dark light, all of it vanished, leaving behind only the dust-laden, silent archive. The air was still, heavy with the aftermath of an impossible event. The shelves were in disarray, books strewn across the floor, but the obsidian shard rested quietly on Elias's desk, its dark surface now dull, inert, its power seemingly spent. Elias and Lena stood where they were, side by side, their bodies perfectly still, their eyes now closed. A moment passed, then another, in the profound, unsettling silence. Then, slowly, Elias's eyes opened. They were no longer the intelligent, questioning grey eyes of Dr. Elias Thorne. They were deep, knowing, and held an ancient sorrow, a quiet wisdom that spoke of millennia, not decades. His gaze swept over the dishevelled archive, not with recognition, but with a detached, almost paternal assessment. The archives, the records of humanity, were just fragments of a much larger story, a prologue to a destiny now fully understood. Lena's eyes opened too, mirroring his own profound, ancient depth. A subtle smile, knowing and serene, played on her lips. They looked at each other, two souls fundamentally transformed, no longer entirely human, but something more, something older, something reborn. The secret of the Anunnaki, of Nibiru, of humanity's true origin and destiny, was no longer a secret to them. It was their reality, their purpose, their very essence. The cycle had closed and a new one had begun, guided by the reawakened consciousness of the ancient lords. The narrator never explicitly answers what happened to Elias and Lena. They are simply different, changed. The story ends not with a resolution, but with an impact, an unshakable sense of the world having irrevocably shifted. The finality of their individual identities has been absorbed into something far grander and more terrifying. The implications hang in the silence, heavy and profound, inviting the spectator to interpret the fate of humanity, of Elias, of Lena. If this content truly opened your mind, comment below, "I saw what he saw." This helps us understand who is truly seeking knowledge beyond the surface. Like the video, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell, because the next episodes will go even deeper. And don't leave without clicking on the next video. It's the continuation of this journey. The world outside continued its frantic, oblivious dance. Cars honked, people hurried, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred in a forgotten sub-basement. The wind still whistled, but now it seemed to carry a different tune, a faint, almost inaudible hum, a resonance that promised the dawn of a new, ancient era. Elias and Lena, standing amidst the ruins of their former lives, were merely the first echoes of a profound transformation, the silent sentinels of a reawakened dominion. The archive was quiet once more, but it was the silence of a tomb, or perhaps a cradle, awaiting the next stage of an ancient, inevitable plan. The true history of humanity, the lost dominion of Nibiru, had finally begun to reveal itself, not as a whisper in the past, but as a roaring wave crashing into the present. And this, the narrator concludes slowly, is just a fragment, a fleeting glimpse of a truth far larger, far older, and infinitely more encompassing than humanity could ever imagine.